Hello, everyone. Welcome to VRIC Media, your most trusted voice in metals and mining. I am your host, Daryl Thomas, and today you are in for a treat because we are interviewing Andy Schectman, the owner and president of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. And today, Andy drops some bombshells when it comes to de-dollarization, devaluation of the dollar, as well as the BRICS nations and the Great Reset. And so, are we headed towards a new world order? That is the question that we answer today. And what does that look like? Andy helps us unpack that, as we know that there's a lot of nuances to these things. So be sure to tune into the interview, hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. And without further ado, let's get to the interview. What's going on, Andy?
Oh, not much. Well, a lot, actually, brother. It's good to be here. It was nice to see you in person at the Rule Symposium. And just a shout out to Jay and the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. There's only two that I go to every year. Rule Symposium here in my backyard in Boca, and then all the way across the other side of the country, the continent, up to Vancouver in January. And it's always an honor to be at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, as it is to be here with you today. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about, man, and looking forward to jumping in with you.
Yes, I was looking at, I was watching one of your recent interviews, and some things that you were talking about had me thinking of an old childhood memory. I remember this memory of watching the older videos of George Bush, not senior, I guess technically a senior, but he used to talk about New World Order. And there used to be a lot of confusion about New World Order in terms of like what it meant, or what it means for the people, what it means for geopolitics, or what do they actually mean by that? And oftentimes in my community, there was a lot of conspiracies around it and such. And so I kind of want to unpack that a little bit, because I feel like you got a good grasp on, at least where things are likely headed. And so I want to unpack that. What is New World Order? What does that look like in terms of the BRICS and these many different things happening with policy and such? And so I just want to give you the floor to start unpacking that for us, if you can help us understand that more.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to unpack, but I mean, if I could kind of try and chip away at it and break it apart to the way that I see things, I think gold is becoming central to a new system. Call it the skeletal system of a new monetary order, whether it be in the BRICS or whether it be in the United States. Last year, the Bank of International Settlements pulled out of Project Enbridge at the 12th hour. They had been developing it with the Bank of International Settlements Innovation Hub with China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. And the Enbridge technology is a cross-border payment system that allows for instant settlement, 7 seconds, 98% reduction in fees, cross-border between central bank digital currencies from country to country, free from SWIFT intervention. And the fifth participant in the Enbridge technology is Saudi Arabia. And things were progressing to the point where Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil and the head of the New Development Bank, the BRICS New Development Bank, said, we've agreed in principle to a new settlement system called the unit. It is a digital representation of a basket of 60% BRICS plus currencies and 40% gold, deliverable upon request. And things were progressing, and you could see that gold was becoming central to their theme. And we've agreed upon it in principle, she said. We're ready to roll it out over Enbridge, which is operational. And at the 12th hour, in what amounts to espionage, James Bond movie, the BIS, which is a Western institution, pulled out and said, we're pulling the plug on Enbridge. We can't, and mind you, this is largely a Chinese technology, although through the Innovation Hub it was refined, and thoughts of rolling it into the Western system as well. And they say we can't be involved in any platform that will allow countries to sidestep Western sanctions. And so they pulled out. Now it's as if they just realized that Russia was the R in BRICS. And then things went very quiet. Now, since then, we've seen some very, very significant things that I think are largely being ignored by the West. And in particular, the new Enbridge, let's call it repackaging, it's called BRICS Bridge. And BRICS Bridge has now been rolled out officially by China. And they're calling it the renminbi cross-border payment system, first and foremost. So what I believe is happening is because Trump is putting so much pressure on the BRICS, they're kind of stepping out for a second, maybe waiting him out and letting China take the lead in developing the rails of this new system. And China came out about 3 or 4 weeks ago and said, and I've talked a lot about this, that, hey, we have connected with the new bridge technology, fully connected and integrated, 11 Asian countries, ASEAN, these are the countries from Southeast Asia, and 5 Middle Eastern countries. This represents 38% of global GDP. This is a big deal, and I will tell you in a minute just how big of a deal it is. But before I get there, about a week later, you had Sergei Lavrov, who was in meetings with Dilma Rousseff the year before, when they both came out of the meeting, said, we've agreed in principle to this new settlement system called the unit. He's been closely involved in all of the BRICS meetings since day one. And a lot of the technology or a lot of the ideas, the infrastructure of how they would roll things out were his. So in any case, he comes out and says, we're going to issue this BRICS technology, this cross-border payment system. We're going to issue it to non-BRICS members, not just the BRICS. A lot of the pushback with the BRICS has been they're not big enough. When he said that, after they had already connected the Asian countries, it became very obvious that this is bigger than people are thinking. And I said publicly they're going to roll it out to the Belt Road Initiative, which it appears they now are. So what I'm getting at is that this system, which would compete with the SWIFT, will settle in 7 seconds, not the 3 to 5 days it would take these countries to go back and forth from dollars, from their currency to dollars and the other currency, and back and forth at a 98% reduction in fees. And they're going to open it to the remainder of the world. It's just not compatible with the pound, the euro, or the dollar. Subsequently, BRICS Pay is also being rolled out to the Belt Road Initiative, which is 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP. This is the cross-border business to business, consumer to business, small bank to small bank, the retail side of BRICS's agenda. Again, China is doing the central bank side. They're calling it the renminbi cross-border payment system, but it is the BRICS bridge. It is the Enbridge technology. But rather than antagonize the president, they're letting China do it first. The key to the third piece of this puzzle, the key to it all, at the same time, we get the expansion of the Shanghai Gold Exchange into multi-jurisdictional vaults around the Belt Road, starting with Hong Kong. The vault is complete. The next one is Saudi Arabia, which is under construction now. The idea between all of this is to allow countries to trade cross-border with one another in their own central bank digital currencies. We already have 16 countries officially signed up outside the BRICS, the Asian countries and the Middle Eastern countries, and to settle imbalances in gold through a series of multi-jurisdictional vaults, whether it be the expansion of the Shanghai Metals Exchange, Hong Kong, which is operational. And by the way, the yuan is immediately convertible into gold, not having to first convert to dollars as you would have in the past. So they're saying, okay, China will trade with Saudi Arabia. They'll send them digital yuan for their oil. Saudi Arabia can then immediately convert that into gold if they wish. Right now in Hong Kong, soon to be in their own country, in these vaults as they expand through the Belt Road, very ambitious endeavor, but ultimately connecting to a whole series of vaulting networks, whether it be in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, in Dubai, the new BRICS Gold Exchange, Shanghai, and the vaults that we see throughout the world. It enables these countries to trade locally in 7 seconds, boosting their own monetary infrastructure, free from SWIFT intervention, and settle any and all imbalances in gold. It's genius. It truly is. And I really hammered this home over the last month. And then yesterday we get an article, or 2 days ago, from Forbes that pointed out that China is now just the third largest trading partner for the United States. And in May, their numbers were less than 6% of trade, which is the lowest level, Daryl, in over 20 years. And the article went on to say that the Asian countries, these same countries that are now hooked up and actually in operation with the new bridge technology, together have a population twice as large as the United States, over 700 million people. They have the fastest growing consumer markets in the world, the fastest growing middle class in the world. And as a group, get this, these countries are now China's largest trading partner by far, way ahead of the EU and the United States. Let me just say that once again. They're connected, and they're the largest trading partner of the U.S., of China, and they can trade cross-border in 7 seconds with no SWIFT interference, no SWIFT recognition. They won't know what's going on, and any imbalances will be able to be settled immediately in gold. This is a massive deal for the BRICS. All right, so that more or less covers the BRICS side of things, where you have, in essence, an expansion of the Shanghai Metals Exchange, connecting with other metals exchanges already in operation in Dubai and in Moscow, the new one that just was built in St. Petersburg. And the ambitious goal over the next year or two is to create this skeletal system of vaults, multi-jurisdictional, so it's not all held in one location like the Bank of England, who had the power to say to Venezuela, yeah, we're not going to give you your gold, thanks anyway, move along. So you want to be able to keep gold in various jurisdictions to mitigate any risk, and then be able to settle imbalances through trade through this entire network. It's important to remember that the Belt Road Initiative, these countries are not in the BRICS, nor is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the largest regional military and financial group in the world, or the Eurasian Economic Union, all the countries that end in STAN, a Russian endeavor like Kazakhstan. These countries are all very, very, very connected to the BRICS. In fact, the president of Belarus has been screaming forever that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, should meld with BRICS. The Belt Road countries, 150 plus countries, 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP. They're not in the BRICS, but they are very connected with the BRICS.
The copper market, of course, is the biggest metal market on the planet, 200 to 300 billion globally of metal traded. Following majors around and picking up projects that they jettison can lead to great success in this business. Vizsla Copper, we're the team that brought you successes including ISO Energy and Vizsla Silver. If you want to learn more, you can find us at vizslacopper.com.
So the misconception that people have, and the underestimation of significance, is that the BRICS are not significant enough, let alone the fact that they now have 9 full members and 15 or more observational members, including Vietnam, including Indonesia, who has the largest nickel deposit. But they have 40 plus countries that have signed up in expressing interest, some more serious than others. But this growing group of BRICS countries, along with all of their trading partners in this growing massive swath of humanity, is growing at a level I don't think people quite grasp. And just the Asian countries and the Middle Eastern countries that have signed up are 38%. You add that to the Belt Road, to the BRICS themselves, and to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, you're pretty damn well near 90% of human population. To underestimate this is a massive mistake. And I think there are those in the Trump administration who understand this. Because since November, Daryl, we have become by far the largest importer of gold in the world. We have never been a net importer of gold in the world, maybe since World War II, after World War II, when everyone sent us their gold as part of the Bretton Woods Agreement in order to have the dollar pegged by gold. And we said to the world, hey, you give us your gold and we will give you $35 for it. With those $35, we should buy our treasuries, earn interest on your gold. We'll save it and keep it in safekeeping instead of the war-torn, 2 World War ravaged Europe. You'll keep it here with us. We'll keep it safe. You can always exchange your gold that you have back to us for 35 bucks an ounce. So instead of keeping it there where it may not be safe, give it to us. You'll earn interest on it. You'll help us, and we'll always exchange the dollars you have at 35 bucks an ounce. So, what's happening in the United States is absolutely insane, to be honest with you. In fact, I've never even begun to see anything like it ever. And if we realize that month over month over month over month since November, we've seen massive amounts of gold come into the United States, and no one is really talking about it on the mainstream at all. And what does it mean? This is a very big deal. When we look, as an example, just to give you an idea of how big it has been, every single month we've seen massive deliveries, massive. And most of my career, less than 1% of contracts that are issued on COMEX stand for delivery. In the first 3 days of this August gold contract that just hit the board, 20,126 contracts of gold at 100 ounces apiece stood for delivery. Now, the interesting thing about that, remember I said only 1%. What is really interesting is that not only and by the way, that's over 2 million ounces of gold, right? You're talking almost $7 billion worth of gold. Every single contract that was issued in the first 3 days has settled for physical metal. That's 100% a 1-to-1 ratio. This means physical delivery is actually taking place, not just speculative paper settlement. You're talking 2,012,600 ounces of gold in 3 business days. Now, there's going to be a lot more that settles. We'll see how much more it truly is. But we have seen north of $100 billion worth of gold come into this country since the beginning of the year or since November. And that's just what we know of. I'm sure there's a lot more coming in, not through the COMEX, through proxy banks, through other channels where reporting it isn't as obvious or a necessity. And who is buying it is the question. Who has the money to stand in 3 days for $7 billion worth of gold here in this country when that's never happened before? This is 4 feet of snow in Death Valley in July. This doesn't happen, but it is happening. And it's happened every month since November, since Trump was elected. Bigger almost every single month. And August is not a primary delivery month. And yet you're seeing $7 billion worth of gold stand for delivery. 100% of the contracts issued. No, we don't want cash. Thank you, Daryl. We'll stand for our metal. Something significant, hugely significant, is happening with gold. And this is where I think things get a little bit interesting, where you try and figure out what might be driving this. And as far as I'm concerned, aside from the strong intent to take physical metal, what you have driving this, I think, is a realization that the world's exchanges are being bled dry by countries around the world that are sophisticated, are motivated, are coordinated, are wealthy, and realize that holding U.S. treasuries is a dangerous endeavor on many levels. They can be weaponized, like we saw with Russia, and confiscated, with the proceeds largely given to the Ukraine in the form of weapons, a country they were in the middle of a war against. And we're the same country, by the way. And again, I'm not passing judgment on war, and I'm a patriot, and I love this country, and I would vote for President Trump again. But let's just say we're a country that 22 years ago invaded Iraq under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, and they're not there. Sorry, we made a mistake. I know we destroyed your country. Sorry, and we toppled your regime. But guess what? 22 years later, we're still here. So what I would say to you is that the world looks at us as being hypocritical. Much of the world does anyway. And so for us to be judge, jury, and executioner with Russia, to sanction them, kick them out of SWIFT, and to confiscate their $5 billion in treasuries and the reserves in SWIFT is a line very difficult to come back from. And when you're kicked out of SWIFT, maybe that gives impetus to something like the bridge technology, which allows 7-second clearing cross-border with no compatibility with the SWIFT system. So finding a back door, if you will. And when you look at gold versus treasuries, the countries in the Southern Hemisphere are dumping treasuries, and they are the ones that usually funded our lifestyle. Japan, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, they're all dumping treasuries. for sure. And now China, what used to be number one in treasury holdings is 3. Number 2 is the United Kingdom. You have 2 of the most broke countries in the world buying each other's debt. It's like 2 drunk guys leaning against each other at the end of bar time so they don't fall over. It's just ridiculous. But the point of it is, look at it the last 25 years. Gold has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury. Look at it last year. Treasury in 10-year was up 4.5%. Gold was up 40. Look at it this year. Halfway through the year, the 10-year treasury is up 2.25%, but the dollar's down 10. So you're talking a net loss of 7.5%. And same time, gold's up 35, 40%. It's a 50+% difference. And so the countries around the world are choosing the safety, the performance, and the removal of counterparty risk found in physical gold and taking possession of it. Deliveries of it. You know, we look at what's happening here in COMEX. A lot of this gold that's hitting the COMEX, most of it is leaving the COMEX, which is also very unusual. It's not going into the eligible category in the COMEX. It's leaving. So it's called a loadout. We're seeing massive deliveries and a lot leaving. Who's doing this? Same thing is true here in the West, where 40+ central banks have pulled their gold out of the New York Federal Reserve, which would for 50 years give access to COMEX, and pulled their gold out of the Bank of England, which would give access to the LBMA. So they're taking physical possession, removing counterparty risk. So anyways, we see all this gold being delivered. What does it really mean, right? What does it mean? Well, we've had suggestions. We've had President Trump tweet on Easter Sunday that he who has the gold makes the rules, the golden art of negotiating. Now, what does that mean? That's interesting, right? We've seen Secretary Bessent say several things that are provocative or certainly interesting, and that is he's a self-proclaimed gold bug. It was his largest holding when he was running a hedge fund. That he would like to preside over a new Bretton Woods, a new monetary system. And with the passage of this Stablecoin Act, you can agree that we are at least I would agree, that we are in the beginnings or in the midst of a new monetary system. Certainly one where synthetic demand for treasuries is replacing organic demand, but we can get to that later. He said things such as, I want to remonetize the asset side of the balance sheet for the U.S. government. Now, he backed off saying it's not gold, because he said that in February, because I think someone said, Scott, what the hell are you doing, brother? What are you doing? We're still bringing all this gold back. You can't say that yet. And the amount of gold that's come in every single month is so crazy, Daryl, that it's never happened before. And so I believe he's talking about gold, because if you look at the $5 trillion balance sheet of the U.S. government, the largest asset of the USG is student debt, 45%. Not going to monetize that. The next largest is military. You're not going to monetize that. You could monetize national parks and stuff, which is third, land. But I'm thinking he's going to remonetize gold. Why do I say that? Gold revaluation, in other words, because number one, it's held in every central bank account in the West, an account called the gold revaluation account. Can't make it up. And it's been done 3 times in this country before, but it is needed. You see, my premise on all of this, Daryl, and you can stop me at any time and ask me questions. Sorry, I'm rambling, but my premise in all of this is that we do not want to be the world reserve currency anymore, no matter what he's saying, and I'll get to that, that we're going to destroy the value of the dollar. And in an effort to bring back manufacturing, which needs to be done, gold revaluation will be part of it. And how am I getting to all of this stuff? That's the part that I want to get to here, but I do believe that. And we'll see if I'm right. You know, a lot of the stuff I said about BRICS over the last 4 years, I was right. And I was the first one to talk about it largely in 2019, 2020. And I got laughed at for a lot of it. People said, you're crazy. And lo and behold, most of it's come true in one form or another. I'm not saying I'm a soothsayer or a magician or have a crystal ball, but maybe I am just stupid enough or have the nerve to say this stuff publicly. So I'll tell you what I actually believe. You know, Vice President Vance came out several months ago and he said, you know, because of Triffin's dilemma on White House letterhead, because of Triffin's dilemma, being the world reserve currency at this stage of the game is probably not beneficial to the dollar. It's not as it's not all that it's cut out to be, in essence. And for people who don't know what Triffin's dilemma is, it is an economic theory that says as the world reserve currency, you will always run trade imbalances. Those trade imbalances, by the way, where we expect everyone to take dollars and put reserves in treasuries that President Trump is yelling about to the world, including to our allies, in the form of tariffs. That's been an extraordinary privilege because the act of using dollars for everything around the world and buying treasuries with reserves have kept our goods that we buy very cheap at Walmart and at Target and asset prices high because they've kept interest rates low with the demand for treasuries and dollars. We've had low interest rates, high asset prices, and very, very cheap goods. So is it really that unfair what's happening? And when Triffin's dilemma says you will always have a trade imbalance because the need for dollars is far greater than what the world can get just simply through trading with the United States alone. They need more dollars. So the Fed has to continue to produce dollars, number one, but these countries need to sell their currency to buy our currency, which pushes theirs down and pushes ours up. So a strong dollar compared to the rest of the world who needs to have dollars to do things in every form creates a situation where manufacturing across the globe is way cheaper than it is here. So it hollows out the manufacturing capacity of a country that holds the reserve status. And this is why we have this trade imbalance, because it's much cheaper to manufacture goods around the world instead of here. So Vance says, look, maybe it's not such a good idea to be the world reserve currency. So I believe, number one, they understand this. And ask yourself, why are we putting tariffs on things like pharmaceuticals when we don't manufacture them? What's the reason for that? It's supposed to protect a industry that really doesn't exist. In other words, what I believe Trump is trying to do is reshore everything. Now, how do you do that? How can you reshore your manufacturing in an environment where we owe $28 trillion in treasuries, Daryl, by 2028? That's what we owe. Those treasuries are coming due. We take in $5 trillion a year in tax revenue. That's $15 trillion or halfway there. But that doesn't take into account the $3+ trillion deficit each year. So call it $3. $9 trillion on top of 28 is 37 with a $15 trillion tax base. You see a problem with the math? I do. And I think they do. Now, this doesn't even take into account things like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and government military pensions with their off balance sheet. We're $200 trillion in debt when you add all this together with a $5 trillion asset base. So this becomes a very big problem mathematically. And I think they understand this. And if we don't manufacture anything, how do we pay our way out of this? It's tax revenue. We don't produce our way out. We don't produce anything anymore. And I think the nobility in everything President Trump is trying to do is to bring back manufacturing. So I'm going to try and lay out right now what I think this is all about. I think they're going to eviscerate the dollar in an effort to support the bond market. Now, how do they do that? So they do it this way. Number one, you issue a stablecoin bill. And that stablecoin bill, where the hell did stablecoins come from? Out of nowhere, right? The name of my podcast I do is Little by Little. It speaks to the term of logarithmic decay. Little by little by little by little, then all at once. Well, holy crap. 2 years ago, no one even knew about stablecoins. Now, all of a sudden, you have Secretary Bessent saying, we're going to go big on stablecoins, and it's passed into law. Why would they do that? These stablecoins that you will see every corporation around the globe, many of them around the globe, issue that will be backed by U.S. treasuries. You just saw yesterday, JP Morgan is now partnering with Coinbase so you can connect your accounts directly and convert, like, for example, your points from JP Morgan on your credit card directly into stable coins. Everything will be stable coins so that it settles like that, like Venmo, like Zelle, like the Bridge 7-second settling. It settles immediately in the name of expediency and convenience. And these stable coins are all going to be backed primarily by U.S. treasuries, which is filling a void, an exodus of organic demand filled by a tremendous amount of synthetic demand manufactured through these stable coins. And all of a sudden, that's the thing that we want. And it is because the demand for U.S. treasuries is falling. Now, why would anybody want to own a 10-year treasury paying 4% if they really knew what inflation was at? The CP lie says it's 3% or whatever, but that's a lie. Go to John Williams of shadowstats.com. He'll show you that add an 8 to that. We're about 11%. This is why they lie about, the stuff coming out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and then fire the gal the other day because her numbers weren't what Trump wanted after revising the unemployment numbers, maybe the largest ever by 250 plus thousand jobs in May and June. The point of it is that why would anyone want to buy our treasuries when they see that we're massively indebted? They see that we have no way to get out of this other than print and inflate or default, that they can be weaponized as we did to Iran and to Russia. They can be sanctioned and taken. You can get kicked out of SWIFT. That because look at the last couple of years, as I mentioned, last year, Treasury was up 4.5%, gold was up 40 with no counterparty risk. Halfway through the year this year, up 2.5, but down 8 or down 10% on the currency. So negative 8% return, gold's up 40. So why own treasuries when you can own gold that is outperforming it, that is going to be the backbone of a new system? I'm going to get to all of this. I'm going to kind of dot the I's and cross the T's, and has no counterparty risk and is outperforming. I think that is what is happening. So on the front end, they're going to load the front end of the yield curve with these stable coins up to 2-year in duration. Load it up. And Bassett says we can get $2 trillion a year or more in stable coin usage, probably more. Now, where does gold come into play here? So if you realize we owe all this money and we're already watching the dollar fall and there is no way to get there but inflation, not going to produce your way out, and you go to this synthetic length of creating stable coins to run the government's engine on the front end. What about the back end? See, how do you ever bring home manufacturing? Remember, Triffin's dilemma says if you're the reserve currency, ain't going to happen. Vice President says maybe being the reserve currency isn't such a good deal. We're issuing tariffs on everyone, including our allies, Japan, the UK, Australia, Canada, Mexico, the European Union. And your friends are saying, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this to us? Maybe we're suggesting that we really don't want you to do all of your transactions in dollars. Maybe you use your own currencies and trade with one another. Here's the reason why. Because I think the way to bring back manufacturing, which we have to do, right? 60% of this country doesn't have college education, Daryl, and we have no manufacturing, and we don't produce anything anymore but IT and financial instruments. And that's a problem for a large portion of the country. You're going to have a massive widening gap between those who have money and those who have none. So what do? And this is the nobility, I believe. If I'm right, this is nobility in what Trump is trying to do. So I had Judy Shelton on my podcast 3-4 months ago. And Judy says to me, Andy, and you can go watch it on my Miles Franklin Media YouTube platform, Judy Shelton. She says, Andy, July 4th, 2026 is a massive day for President Trump. By the way, Judy was Trump's, if you don't know by now, Trump's nominee to run the Federal Reserve in 2016, and I think she's in the running for it now. But she said, he told me that July 4th, 2026 is a huge day for him, that it is the 250th anniversary of the United States. And I believe he will roll out gold-backed treasuries on July 4th, 2026. He's told me such. Now, the first step would be to bring in the gold that has been offshored around the world. We are seeing more gold coming to this country than at any time ever, more so than anywhere in the world right now. We are literally flooding the COMEX with gold deliveries. Again, 7 billion in the first 3 days of August, but it's been like this the entire year. And yet media doesn't talk about it. Pretty interesting. Who is it? Could it be the Treasury Secretary using the cover of the Exchange Stabilization Fund to protect the country? Don't have to tell Congress if that's the case. Don't tell anyone. Who's bringing in all this gold? We don't know. It's weird that we don't know, right? So the first thing you would do is have to reshore all of the gold. And I said to Judy, do you know, why hasn't it been audited, Judy? And she says, it's held in the New York West Point Mint, the Denver Mint, the New York Fed and Fort Knox, and it's always being claimed that it's logistically challenged and too expensive. This is where the United States, for God's sakes, audit the damn gold, spend the money. Yes, it will be audited, she says. And then I say, Judy, do you know gold is held in an account called the Gold Revaluation Account? She says, I do. Do you think gold will be revalued? Not in so many words, she says, yes.
Couple things. So for an investor like me, I'm really trying to look at risk on all different scales. And just a couple of things that you mentioned, like really highlight my kind of risk alert, in my head. And so a couple things, and not to push back on you, I think that you're a reasonable guy. We've I think we shared a drink or two one time. We're cool. So with Trump threatening India and Russia, so my concerns would be, first of all, who India buys oil from. It should be none of our business. Because mostly they're probably reselling it to us anyway. There's no name stamp on the oil. But I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, that's like a threat to two BRICS nations. And so what kind of implications does that have? Because, like, it seems like, you have the BRICS, they are, gathering, and organizing together, and such. And then you have, Trump, who does not like the BRICS and has said many things many things about them and what they should and shouldn't do. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, does that lead to some type of global conflict at some point? Does that make the risk for global conflict, more higher, in the future? So I want to
not in my mind. And India, through anonymous sources, has said they don't care what he says. They're going to continue to buy oil from Russia. And it just reinforces the reasoning to buy or to come together, to form the BRICS. Again, instead of extending the olive branch, it's coercion, it's bullying, it's threats, it's sanctions, it's tariffs. India has always been an ally of the United States, but they are a charter member of BRICS, and they basically are saying we're going to buy oil from whomever we want. You're seeing a lot of countries hedge their which side of the fence they're on. Saudi Arabia is a good example. They're fully admitted into BRICS, haven't accepted it yet. They're a full participant in the mBridge technology, the first five to do it, one of the fifth of four that designed it: China, Hong Kong, Thailand, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. They are building a vault for the Shanghai Metals Exchange in their country, yet they're still friendly with the United States. They did not re-sign up for the exclusivity of the dollar oil peg at the 50-year anniversary a year or two ago, but they'll still take dollars, but they'll take other things. So I don't think it will set off any alarm bells on confrontation, but I think, to me, it just exacerbates and exemplifies the reasoning to form an alliance the way all of these countries have.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. And then to touch back on the CBDCs, so that was a big concern of people, even for me, when it comes to, privacy and such. And obviously the central bank having control over that, and, the banning of cash and all of that, and just gives so much control over the American people. And so what's the difference between government, reducing regulation for companies to do stable coins and such, and a CBDC? Because it seems like, the government makes the rules, and we look at, this is obviously a different scenario, but we look at the Hunt brothers, right? They change the rules under them. And so, let's say we get someone like a Biden back in, and those rules can be changed, and so I'm just kind of wondering, how does that differ from a CBDC in any type of surveillance type state?
I think it's very similar, only it's not being administered by the U.S. government. It's by third parties, but the on-ramps and the off-ramps will be controlled very, very much so. In fact, there's a very interesting interview I listened to by the gentleman who designed BRICS Bridge. And he, too, said it's being rolled out to the Belt Road. and which is 150 countries, and all of the countries will be able to use it around the world, except it's not compatible again with the dollar, the pound, or the euro. So they're excluding the West. And the lady said to him, you know, I want you to think of this in terms of stable coins. Said, Andre, I think his name is Andre, you know, there are terrorists out there. How do we know that your BRICS pay technology, which is like B2B, it's retail, how do you know that it won't be used to fund terrorism? He says, that's a great question. Because we are rolling it out to such a large swath of the world and the countries around the world, we are very sensitive to regulations. And our software, our technology is pre-programmed with AML, KYC, and KYT. Now, my corporation was left in Minnesota. Even though I moved to Florida 5 years ago, we've had a satellite office in Florida for 15 years, but I left my parent corporation in Minneapolis, even though it would have saved me money to move everything down here, because we're the only state in America that regulates the federally non-regulated industry. So I take all of the anti-money laundering classes, the classes on continuing education. We're the only state in America that regulates it, holds us to a higher standard. But I take all those classes, and I know what AML is. That's anti-money laundering. I know what KYC is. That's know your client. That's everywhere, right? And I've done about 7 or 8 interviews since I heard this, and I've asked everyone, do you know what KYT is? I didn't know what it is. I had never been told that. But it reminds me of people saying when they go to the bank and say, I need $2,000 in cash. And the teller says, what are you going to do with all that cash? Well, none of your business. Point of it is KYT means know your transaction. And I'd never heard that before. So this new technology that is being rolled out in BRICS Pay, I guarantee you, they have the technology in all of these stable coins to AML, anti-money laundering, KYC, know who you are and where the money came from, and KYT, what the hell you're buying. And the noose of the lack of privacy is closing in on you, where eventually it is the precursor to a cashless society. Not in the form of a CBDC, but it has the same on-ramp, off-ramp capabilities. They'll know what you're doing because of all of these technologies built into it. And, you know, I go skiing every year I go up to Whistler at Jay's conference. Every time I'm up in Vancouver, I'll spend a few days with some friends in Whistler. And then when I come back, I'll go spend a few days in Vail or Beaver Creek with my family and my friends. And they're all the same organization. Vail owns Whistler, and it's one of the largest corporations in America. The last several years, they are cashless 100%. You go to the Super Bowl the last few years, you walk in with cash, you put it into a reverse ATM, you get a Visa card that comes out that you can use within the confines of the Super Bowl arena. The point is, the world is going cashless little by little, and this will close the door on, I believe, on people's ability to maintain privacy, even though it is a stable coin. But the real reason, there are 2 reasons. 1, it ushers in a surveillance state mentality, and 2, it begins to fund the front end of the curve. All right, now let me go back for a minute, because we have to close this loop here, because it all comes together here now. And you stop me if you have questions. All right, we're at the point now where all this gold's come in. Don't know who's bought it. Massive amounts. A lot of it, most of it, leaving the COMEX. We see they've got the front end covered through the issuance of stable coins, and you will see more and more and more and more companies. Again, JP Morgan just partnered with Coinbase to allow this. The proliferation of stable coins will blow you away within the next few months. All of them are going to be tied to the U.S. Treasury to give that synthetic demand. But that's for the front end. Now we have this manufacturing problem. If that's really what he wants to do, how do you bring it back? How do you bring it back in a world where we owe $28 trillion plus the $9 trillion or so in deficit spending in 3 years with $15 trillion in tax revenue? You don't. And the dollar is already falling, down 10% this year. So why would any country not only want to take our treasuries, but even sell us their goods, really, at this point, in a system where the dollar is collapsing, but in particular the treasuries? Why would they want to give us our treasuries when they know we're going to inflate? And in that environment, there'll always be demand for treasuries at a much higher rate of interest on the back end. So that's why they'll put the stable coins on the front end, which have low interest rates, short duration. But the point of it is that when we got above 5% last time on the 10-year, Silicon Valley and Signature Bank started to fail. The system started to break. And when rates go too high because of 25 years of suppressed interest rates, which created distortions in asset prices, the suppressed interest rates push stocks and bonds and real estate to stratospheric levels. And if rates were to rise high enough, if to really attract demand in that environment, the banks would blow up, just like they did before. The stock market would blow up, the real estate market would blow up, and the bond market would blow up, and the insurance companies that are loaded with treasuries. It's the Great Reset. If you put rates up to 10 or 12% in a massive hyperinflationary environment where we are absolutely going to try and print our way out of this environment, out of this predicament, rates would have to be high enough to compensate for that. This is why they lie about the CP lie. This is exactly why, because the TIPS, the Treasury, inflation-protected securities, and the debt, it's all tied to inflation. So we lie about inflation, we lie about unemployment, so we can continue to keep the game going. But how high would rates have to go to attract that demand? You get above 5 on the 10%, on the 10-year, you're in big trouble. So what do? Well, Judy came on my show and said they're going to peg it to gold. So let's talk about gold revaluation for one moment. And is it a theory? Yeah, and it's not a conspiracy theory. As I mentioned, the Federal Reserve just put out a paper on it on their website on the possibilities of it. Gold in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, went back on our promise to the world, no, we're no longer going to give you your gold back for $35 an ounce. It was pegged at 35 at that point, closed. The next year in 72, he revalued the price of gold to $38, depreciating the dollar by 7 or 8%. The next year he did it to $42.22, devaluing the dollar again. That's where it stayed on our books since 1973, $42.22 an ounce. Now, if it were just simply mark to market, that would give the Treasury over 800, almost 900 billion free and clear. And the way that works is the Treasury issues gold certificates to the Federal Reserve and gives the gold to, in essence, to the Fed, who holds it. The Fed prints money out of thin air and gives it to the Treasury. So in essence, it's an accounting gimmick. The Fed does not have claim on the gold, only on the cash value of it. The gold belongs to the American people. So $800 billion goes straight to the Treasury if it's market. Now, there are guys like James Rickards, who he's someone who's probably at VRIC every year. Mm-hmm. He is as smart as they come. He has spent years working with the CIA doing simulated financial war games, the Pentagon. He is a smart man. He's coming up with a number around, I believe, 24,000. There are lots that are, you got Mike Maloney saying 15,000. You got all these people with these numbers, and they get there by dividing M1 or M2 into the gold supply. However they get there, they get there. And you can go listen to Jim and find out how he got there. But if they moved it up to something like 24,000, as crazy as that sounds, first and foremost, the Treasury would not even need congressional approval to do this. They would just simply tell the Federal Reserve to revalue gold to $24,000 an ounce immediately. Now, that would benefit every central bank on the planet. They've all been loading up on gold for the last several years, every one of them. Not going to get a ton of pushback from the banks. The act of doing that would devalue the dollar by about 60%. The dollar gets way devalued. The price of gold goes to $24,000. Every $4,000 increase in the price of gold would give the Treasury general account $1 trillion free and clear. They get $6 trillion. That $6 trillion, they can start to pay down their debt. Now, what did Judy say? July 4th, 2026, they'll issue treasuries pegged to gold. Here's the key. How do you bring back manufacturing without rates going high enough because we are so far indebted? Well, you simply peg the back end of the bond market at a zero coupon, no interest rate, redeemable in gold. The more stupid we are with monetary and fiscal policy, gold acts as the inflation hedge and goes higher and higher and higher. It is the high interest rate. It allows us to have zero interest on the long end of the bond market, zero. And it allows us then to devalue the dollar massively. And that's exactly what you would have to do if you weren't the world reserve currency in order to attract demand for your manufacturing. So at a zero interest rate environment and a devalued dollar, you now can quickly bring home your manufacturing, start retooling it, bring home the weapons manufacturing or the the aircraft parts or the pharmaceuticals, all the strategic, bring it all back. Bring it all back. You have a massively devalued dollar and you have zero borrowing costs, redeemable in gold, but zero borrowing costs on the back end. You bring back manufacturing. And now maybe you have a chance to grow yourself out of this problem. In an environment where the dollar has been way devalued and interest rates are zero on the long end, with the stable coins running the government on the front end. And so when you talk about how do you get out of this problem, how do you bring back, if we don't bring back manufacturing, our children and our grandchildren are dead in the water. AI is going to kneecap so many white collar jobs, it's not even funny. And 60% of the country has no college degree, and we don't make anything. We need to bring it back. How do you bring it back in an environment where rates are too high and the dollar's too strong? You devalue the dollar, you revalue gold, you tie gold to the back end of the bond market so you have zero coupon, so you can, with a devalued dollar and zero interest rates, bring all that back. You have the stable coins running the front end. And Judy Shelton said, Andy, he's going to do this. He's going to peg it to the Treasury, to the back end, to the bond market, on July 4th, 2026. So my theory, in a nutshell, is that because we realize what the BRICS are doing, they came out and said, we have agreed in principle to a gold-backed settlement currency. All they're doing now, instead of issuing the unit, because of all the heat on the BRICS, is trading in local currencies or building the rails for it and settling in gold. The unit will slide into that infrastructure at some point once it's fully matured. But I think someone in our administration said, you need to do this. It's happening in real time. If we don't reshore the gold, if we don't do these things, we're dead. And by Vance coming out and saying it's, because of Triffin's dilemma, it's not such a good idea to be the world reserve currency. Now look at the tariffs. Is it really smart to put tariffs on pharmaceuticals, which we don't make, but we need? Is it really smart to put tariffs on all of our friends when we are insolvent, when we are hypocritical, according to much of the world? The way that we handle our affairs, think of Iraq, when we are coercive instead of cooperative, when we are imposing sanctions instead of extending the olive branch, all of these things you have to take the contrarian view and say, well, what if? What if they're trying to tell the world that find another way to trade, but the rails of the bond market will be the way for them to maintain their liquidity and to put reserves into something stable because it will be pegged to gold. And that would enable us to bring back our manufacturing. And I could see Trump coming up on stage, Daryl, on a Sunday night and saying, look, we've messed up this exorbitant privilege. But at this point, we need to bring back manufacturing for the future of this country. We need to. And so this is what we are going to do. And it's going to take some time and there's going to be a little bit of pain. It will come at the expense of the lower and middle class folks who maybe they issue universal basic income for a while. I don't know what happens when the dollar is wickedly devalued and massive inflation. But I do know this. If you save in dollars now, you're destined to go broke. If you're not a contrarian, you're destined to be a victim. Rick Rule's famous statement. And I think we're at a point in time where these types of unconventional ideas have to happen. Now take a step back and remember, what did Judy say? July 4th, they're going to do it. What did Besant say? I'm a self-proclaimed gold bug. I want to preside over a new Bretton Woods and to remonetize the asset side of the balance sheet. What did Trump say? He who has the gold makes the rules. Put all this stuff together and ask yourself, is this possible? I don't know. I think it is. And my idea is that the dollar's dead in an effort to support the bond market, in an effort to bring back through a massively devalued dollar, bring back manufacturing and grow our way out so that the next generation and the future generations have a future because we can lead the world in ingenuity, in manufacturing, and that would be the way out. Because as it is right now, we're in trouble if we don't at some point bring it back, and there's no easy way to do so.
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and appreciate you laying out that theory for us too. I think that, even if it's not completely how that looks, I can definitely see a version of that coming to pass.
And I would agree. I mean, there's a million different variables, but one way or the other, we have to deal with the loss of manufacturing, our massive indebtedness, all of these assets being driven sky high because of low interest rates. So, it's funny because Trump says, well, we need to lower interest rates to make housing more affordable for first-time house buyers. Well, isn't that how we got in this problem to begin with? Yeah, at low interest rates, you might be able to take out a bigger loan, but the value of homes will just continue to go higher in a low interest rate environment. So the only way the housing dilemma gets solved is by lower prices. And so, look, the bottom line is that we have distorted reality so greatly through suppression of interest rates for so long that this is what happens when you mess with Mother Nature. And now we have to take unconventional steps to dig our way out. If we don't, as a country, we will watch the power shift eastward from a country that doesn't, from the country that led the world forever, becoming a country who makes nothing and is too far indebted, into countries who understand the concept of real commodities and of infrastructure. And I just think now is the time to understand being solely in dollars is the worst possible thing that you can do for your financial health.
Yeah. So obviously, we're both gold bugs, and I don't know if you're more of a silver bug right now or a gold bug, but so owning gold, obviously, inflation is a big risk to our wealth, and owning gold helps protect us against inflation. So a couple things that I'm keeping my eye on, obviously, are the tariffs. I mean, the tariffs are, essentially, putting higher taxation on other nations, but they typically pass it on to whoever's importing the goods, and whoever imports it typically passes it down to the consumer. So it's like another backdoor way of taxation, in my view, which is inflation, because taxes aren't even included in the CPI, the CPI. And then a devaluation of the dollar would lead to a significant amount of inflation, because your dollars are not going to be able to purchase as much as they would today. And we've seen that year by year by year. So could you speak to the importance of gold being that inflation hedge and potentially, protecting us from what may come?
Well, I mean, that's really what it is for. I mean, you can, like, for example, the median price of a home was $232,500 in 2005, and gold was $445. So if we do the math and take 232.5, I'll show you this in real time, 232,500 divided by 445. 522 ounces of gold in 2005, you could have bought a house. And maybe you didn't do it. You took out a mortgage instead. Here we are 20 years later with that gold that you decided not to sell, the 522 ounces you left under your mattress, and which would have bought you a $240,000 house. Instead, you leave it under your mattress, earning nothing but dust, no interest. So the price of a house has gone up just under $200,000, right? And meaning that the dollar has, the price of real estate has increased, or your dollar has devalued or deflated against real estate. So it's been a good investment. But how about the 522 ounces of gold you left under your mattress times about $3,350? That's $1,750,000 divided by 410,000. Well, that buys you 4.5 houses right now. So my point is that as the dollar devalues and inflates, you go back to 1960 and do the same thing. An ounce of a house was $17,000. I used to say this all the time. An ounce of gold was 35. That's like 485 ounces, right? And that $17,000 today wouldn't even buy you furniture for your house. But the 485 ounces of gold, again, you're talking almost $2 million or $1.7 million or whatever, $1.5 million. And that's the point, is that the dollar continues to devalue, and gold, and this is going back 65 years. So that instead of selling your 485 ounces of gold in 1960, you pay $17,000 for a house. Today, those 485 ounces of gold buy you 3 houses. That's $17,000, doesn't even buy you the furniture. So this is the insidious devaluation of the dollar through inflation that slowly we don't realize. My father, when he graduated college in 1963, he was married. He says to me, you know, Andy, your mom and I were married that year in 1963. I earned $6,000 a year and the two of us could live comfortably. Think about that for a minute, Daryl. My parents could live comfortably as newlyweds in 1963 on $6,000 a year. Now, how the hell is that even fathomable? How is that? This is the problem with holding your wealth in dollars and not realizing it's being inflated away. So for 60 years, 65 years, gold earning zero interest has outpaced the dollar that much. And that's the lesson to be learned. It's the tortoise, not the hare. Over the last 25 years, gold has doubled the performance of the 10-year Treasury. It's beat the S&P 500 with dividends reinvested. I mean, any way you look at it, gold is the tortoise, not the hare. But here we are at the end of the race, or getting there, and gold is leading everything. Maybe with the exception of Bitcoin, maybe not. But everything else, gold is leading the way. So that's why you hold it.
There's some interesting nuance in there too. I mean, obviously the lesson is still the same, but you know, thinking about during that time in 2005, you know, where housing prices were shooting up and gold didn't necessarily. It started moving up, but it didn't really reach its peak until 2011, and so like. There's kind of like these weird nuances within there, but the lesson remains the same that, I mean, gold is king, you know what I'm saying? And that's my view. So Andy, you have a channel and everything. You're doing a lot of work, in the media space and educating folks. Where can people connect with you, find more about what you're doing, watch some of your content and things of that nature?
I appreciate that. We just hired Michelle McCory. We're so excited to have her. She's extraordinary.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's extraordinary. One of the most well-researched, brightest human beings I've ever met. And we're thrilled to have her. She's just finished her second interview, I think, with Ed Dowd. That's Miles Franklin Media. I've done thousands of interviews, and now we bring in the pro. She'll be sitting next to me once a week. We'll do something together, and she'll do her own shows and panels and all that kind of stuff. More to come. That's Miles Franklin Media on YouTube. For people who want our price list, and this is the important part, or any questions they have for me about anything you and I just talked about, or precious metals IRAs or anything, we do things a little bit differently than the online companies. We do post prices for very small orders, but our price list can be requested. No obligation at info at milesfranklin.com. Just request the price list or any questions you have, no obligation. You want to be contacted, let us know, put your phone number down. We will do so. Check your spam if you don't get it right away. 1 out of every 10 or 20 of the emails we send gets stuck in people's spam filters because it's coming from a corporate server. But our prices should be as good or better than anywhere in the country. Now, we don't update that list every day. We try and do it a few times a week. If you find a better price in North America, let us know. Chances are we'll be able to match it or beat it. But we've never had a customer complaint. More importantly, I mentioned I left my company in Minneapolis because it is the only state that regulates what is a federally non-regulated industry, that being Minnesota. No complaint ever in 35 years and almost $13 billion in sales, and we will do the very best to give you the best price. And Jay Martin and Vancouver Resource Investment Conference means a lot to me. So please let us know you came from this so that we can make sure you're treated the right way. Any questions, no obligations, let us know. Info at milesfranklin.com. And it's always good to be with you, Daryl, and appreciate the opportunity of letting me run like this with these theories. And maybe I'm stupid to say these things, but I feel it in my soul that something along this line of thinking has to happen in order for us to regain any hope of being what the United States once was, and that is the engine of manufacturing, of ingenuity, of growth, of freedom. All of these things have to happen. We have to find a way to bring back manufacturing, to grow our way out of this problem. Because as Richard Russell said to me almost 20 years ago, Andy, the Fed has two choices, inflate or default. This is option 3, soft default on the dollar to reignite demand for the Treasury, push rates low, bring back manufacturing. and start the cycle of growth and manufacturing all over again, maybe at the expense of being the world reserve currency, but still the preeminent power in the world. This is one way that you could achieve it. So I guess we'll see where the chips fall when the dust settles.
Yes, agreed. And we definitely got to have you back on as things are continuously developing and everything. And you are staying on top of this, my friend. So happy to have you on as the expert. And you've done a lot of due diligence in this particular area of research. And so want to thank you again for coming on.
Pleasure is mine, my man. My best to Jay, and we'll see you in Vancouver in a few months.
Yes, indeed. And all right, you all, be sure to click the subscribe button on the channel as we're going to be uploading more and more content. Hit that subscribe button so that you're notified when we release a new video. And thank you all for watching.